All right, we're going to call to order the meeting for the City of Wildwood Board of Public Safety for Thursday, April 11th, 2024, 6:30 p.m. First order of business is roll call. Here.
Here. Here. Present.
Okay. Second item of business is the approval of minutes from the February 8th, 2024 meeting. I assume that all board members have had a chance to review those minutes. Barring any corrections, do I have a motion to approve?
I'm make the motion,
Go ahead.
approve the minutes.
A second.
No second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, minutes are approved. Third item on our list is public comment, and we have gotten a couple of emails that are going to from citizens who wish for their concerns to be addressed but could not make the meeting, so we are going to have those comments read. If you wish, I can read them. I have them, yeah. It's okay, you can, yeah, I got the email, so. Here's the first one right here, Tracy. Yeah. There you go. And then you just back and go, yeah.
Okay, we have a couple of public comments to read into the record tonight. The first is from Councilmember Tracy Nyan, and it reads in the subject, Garden Valley Guardrails, and this is, good morning. Thank you in advance for considering the removal of guardrails in Garden Valley as requested by their HOA at tonight's meeting. The request is being made over concern of current and continued maintenance costs for the guardrails. HOA budgets are stretched with the increased cost of everything, and this cost would be an extra burden on the Garden Valley HOA budget. Thank you, Tracy Nyan. Another item from comment today. Second.
It's not your fault. I'm probably one of the few people that has an Android, so. There's just two.
The second written public comment tonight is from Councilmember Scott Ottenberg, Ward 3, and it reads, April 11th, Board of Public Safety meeting. Board of Public Safety members, please consider the request of the Garden Valley Farms HOA to remove guardrails as outlined under Item 6, Section 2 in tonight's agenda. The reason for the request concerns the maintenance costs associated with the guardrails and the strain of those costs on the budget of the HOA. Thank you in advance, Scott Ottenberg. Thank you.
Speak to that.
And that will conclude public comment because we do not have currently anyone in the attendees block. If you are wanting to participate, please raise your hand, but we do not see any at this time, Marshall.
So we have no other public comments for this evening's meeting. We can wait. Thank you, sir. You just come up to the podium, state your name, and then you get to make your comment. Hang on 1 second. I don't think your mic's on.
Okay, so,
There you go.
my name is Kerry Tebby. I live at 211 Cobble Field Court, Wildwood, Missouri, Ward 4. And I have an issue with speed in our little postage stamp subdivision. It's posted 25. The traffic officer that runs radar in that particular area, Officer Bamer, was requested to put up a speed monitor on our utility, or not our utility pole, our light poles. He said that he couldn't find a good area to put the speed monitor up. So they just chose the middle of the subdivision on a light pole. Now, mind you, our streets are no more than 1,000 feet in any direction, west, east. That's primarily, it's west, east, and north and south. Our trustees wrote a letter to the council. I don't know who else it was addressed to, but they asked for the speed limit to be reduced to 15 miles per hour. Given that 2 years ago, I was raising some a beef about the speed in our subdivision. Not so much our residents, because they know better. They drive normally. It's people that come from the outside that are delivering packages or delivering food, and they're in a hurry. Or the occasional young kid who wants to do a burnout in a cul-de-sac. I have video cameras and I've got taped. So I asked for a slow children playing sign to be put up. We had no signs at all, because we had you smile, you're on video camera. That's the only sign we had. And we placed it on a sign that was recently put up. And I asked for a slow children playing sign up. Not only did I get a slow children playing sign put up, I got a 25-mile-per-hour sign put up. And it wasn't a small regular sign. It was a huge sign, including there's no outlet in our subdivision. Huge, very huge. Rick Brown was there. I had a face-to-face with him. I said, "What's the implied speed limit without a sign?" He said it was 25. I said, "Well, why do you even take the sign down? Just leave the slow children playing sign up, if that's the implied speed." He said, "I will if the HOA writes a letter." Well, he got a letter from the HOA, and we have a 25-mile speed limit sign. The only thing that he did was put up the speed monitoring device, which is very inconclusive because it was only up for 7 days.
Mhm.
So I'm asking for the Public Safety Commission to please consider lowering our speed limit to 15 miles per hour and/or taking the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit sign down. Officer Bamer told me that 25 miles an hour in our subdivision is careless and imprudent driving. You can't drive 25 miles an hour. There's no way. I've got maps in my subdivision, if you all would like to look at them.
So how long ago was the speed survey done? Do you know?
Pardon me?
How long ago was the speed survey done?
You have to ask Rick. I think it was 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago.
And do we know?
I would say first part of March, latter part of February.
Oh.
2024,
And so you set it for how many days?
7.
All right. So, we'll take this up with Captain Mundell and his team. Okay. They have the capability of redoing that speed survey. And then what the city doesn't want to do, in my opinion, is if the speed survey doesn't reveal a problem, then we don't invent a problem, so to speak. So let us start with that. Let's do another survey. Okay.
That'd be fine. You're not going to get anything out of the survey because it's very, very sporadic.
Is it just 1 or 2 cars?
Yeah. And we got kids. We got young families moving in the subdivision, and kids, they move there because the kids play in the street. And I'm afraid I'd rather be proactive than reactive,
Right.
because I was a firefighter paramedic for 37 years.
Right.
So I know, I've seen it happen. And I don't want it to happen here. I don't want it to happen on Strecker Road.
So let's do this. We'll work with the police department, okay? And do a little bit more in-depth survey on what's going on there. And then at that point, we'll have more information to make a recommendation to the city.
Sure. Would you like to see our plat?
Yeah, if you want to leave it here, yeah,
Yeah.
we can take it and we can give it to Captain Mundell because he's going to be the person that's going to lead the, okay? Okay, thank you. I understand your concerns. Vince?
Yeah, and perhaps Rick, you can, is 25 the default? Unless there's specific ordinances or legislation that create something else, is that like the default speed limit?
Board members, I'd recommend this be on the agenda as a topic for your discussion if you would like to discuss it further.
I'm sorry, what now?
I would recommend this be on the agenda for discussion. Frankly, the default speed limit is 25 miles an hour for the city. Yep.
The city, if something, if no one says, what should we make it? It gets made 25 kind.
Our neighboring city, Ellsville, is 20.
Okay, and I don't dispute any of that. I was just trying to figure out what our default was of, thank you.
Thank you for bringing it to our attention. Okay, we'll take a look at it.
Thank you, John.
You bet. Are there any more public comments?
At this time, Marshall, there are no other public comments. No one in the waiting room. Thank you.
Move up to the next item of business, the informational. First item is deer management, the White Buffalo final report. There are copies of it in the back for the people who want it, and all of the board members have it. Do we have someone who can just do a quick synopsis on what is a very detailed report?
Yes, thank you, Marshall Bader. In this case, White Buffalo came out and worked with the city for the first year of the deer management program, which is going to be something that the city is going to have to work on over the course of the next several years. In this case, they did come out from January 16th. Well, when it comes to baiting, they came out right after the new year, and they actually started sharpshooting operations on January 16th. And those operations lasted until February 10th of 2024. And during that 26-day period, 24 of those days, they were active. One of the default days that no sharpshooting occurred, there was inclement weather, and the other, it was to kind of recoup and get the baiting back up to snuff. And in this case, within those days, which we had 26 days contracted of actual operations in the agreement, they were to, they actually got finished 2 days early with 300 deer per the agreement. So that was the max that was permitted under the Department of Conservation's permit. And on top of that, all of those deers, with the exception of one or two on the outliers, were some supporting properties that were on the western side of 109, the west and the north side of 100. The vast majority were sharp shot in Northeast 1, and at the specifically with Strecker Road in Clayton, they were able to take quite a few deer at that time. Of that, some notable items to pick is that 30 of the deer carcasses were actually sent off to the Missouri Department of Conservation, and they were tested for a plethora of different diseases that deer can contract. And in this case, they all came back clean. There was no concerns that were reported from MDC. On top of that as well, it was found that so this is not in the report, but something that was discussed with the department and also discussed in general from White Buffalo is that there was reported 92 deer per square mile in the Northeast 1 areas, which why we decided to go there first. They thought it's probably north of 100 at this point, 110. So the fact that they were able to get to that number makes sense, but they were looking to have a total of around 30 to 40 properties. They were able to get access to around 30, and they actually ended up sharpshooting and actually sharp shot a deer on 24 of those properties. But overall, it was an absolute pleasure to work with them from the department's perspective. White Buffalo is a very professional organization. They worked really well. They were very transparent. They kept both myself and the director of public works and our police department in the loop on everyday operations. And the city actually got not as many calls as expected. So overall, they were able to go in with surgical precision and lower the number of deer that are currently roaming in the Northeast one area. So overall, I would say the first year of the operations were a really good success, and we look forward to hopefully working with them in the future on the other areas. Thank you.
Well, and my comment would be is they were literally in my backyard and I never knew they were there. So, like you said, a professional organization. Mr. Loyal.
Is it a multi-year contract right now, or is it just?
At this time, we did enter into an agreement for the first year of operations, so that only covered for 2024. That being said, the city council has appropriated and created a new deer management fund as part of the 2024 budget, and that deer management fund currently would hold $1 million was appropriated. So in this case, it does seem there's intent from the city council to continue this relationship in 2 other areas. And at this time, just to kind of look towards the future, the department has been working with St. Louis County, the St. Louis County Police Department, and Sergeant Wendling to conduct a deer sampling in the Northeast 1 area to see what the impact was. And then also, unfortunately, we did get the bloom a little early this year with the warm weather that came in, but we were also able to conduct the site distance sampling in the Northeast 2 area. But at this time, we'll be looking to conduct the remaining deer sampling studies in November of 2024 when the brush is then cleared again. And then on top of that as well, we're looking right now at which map, or are we going to go back to the current NE1 map to complete what we started?
What did the first year cost us?
Originally, the contract stipulated $216,000 with White Buffalo. It ended up being 209 because they didn't have the amount of they didn't have to put in the amount of hours. So we came in a little bit under budget there.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm just curious on the details of that. Is there in the agreement, were we targeting age-wise, male, female? Was there any discussion of what that mix, I know you can't be precise, but what we wanted it to be, or?
Yeah, so in the actual agreement, it was total up to 300. So that the key word there is up to. And then on top of that, I would have to look back on the exact specifics, but I believe it was a maximum of 120 antlered deers they could cull in this case, and that was per the permit with the Department of Conservation. So in that case, they actually came in under that number. They did sharpshoot quite a few males, but when you look at it, they were actually antlerless because they were not adults yet. So in that case, it was up to 120, and then the rest should have been does, fawns, or more of the younger variety.
Is it desirable to get the fawns?
Yes, very much so.
I noticed 30% roughly were fawns, or 6 months or less. So I didn't know if that was kind of a focus.
Yep, very much
you.
so. And in general, they have to stick, and White Buffalo and the city, we have to stick to the guidelines of the permit that's granted by the Department of Conservation. That being said, that is something that if they could, they were going to try to maximize the amount of fawns and younger does.
Is there any deer strike lessening correlation?
In this case, and Captain Mundell may be able to speak a little bit further on this, but we tonight are actually reviewing 2023's crash analysis, which includes a nice segment on deer collisions. That being said, when it comes to the data that will show this impact since the operations took place in 2024, we actually wouldn't be able to see that impact on deer collisions until next year when we get this report.
Then that makes sense. I mean, we've got 2023 data. There's a couple less deer. Now we'll wait for 2024.
Overall, though, if you don't mind if I add, Marshall, overall, after studying these kind of operations that have taken place across the country, it is pretty clear that when they do come in and they get the property access they need, you do see a significant decrease in the number of deer vehicular collisions. So if you can lower the density, that is going to naturally coincide with lower deer collision strikes. And obviously, based off last year's report, but going to this year's report, it seems that November number seems to be continuing as the most dangerous number when it comes the most dangerous month when it comes to deer vehicular collisions. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the deer management project? Moving on, the next is the review of the 2023 annual vehicle crash analysis report. Captain Mundell.
Thank you. There's a lot of information in there. Our overall for 2023 was less than 500 crashes. Of that, About 60% of them occur on our main roadways, 109, 100, Old State, Clayton Road, Manchester Road. Smaller percentage, about 14% involve injuries. And as we were just talking about deer, that is about, I don't remember that number offhand, actually. There's a significant number of our crashes are deer crashes, but for the most part, we have a low number of injury crashes. They're spread out throughout the city. Good news is we have not had a fatal accident in Wildwood since 2019. We had 2 of them that year. So that's a good thing. Our traffic volumes have returned to pretty much the average that we've had prior to the COVID situation. We had a significant traffic drop there. The numbers reflected that, and it has slowly recovered. Past 2 years or so, we've been back to our normal traffic volumes. Of note, there's a construction project now underway at Wild Horse Creek, Highway 109, for a new roundabout. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. Beginning of this year, the state rolled out a new crash report form, which means nothing to everybody else, but it's more data boxes for us to check when we do a crash report. So, we'll see what kind of data we can pull out of that would be of help to us in doing our analysis. That is all I got.
Well, I will say as a shout out to you and your team, the fact that when you look at this crash data was from 2023 compared to 2022, you know, we only saw a 2.3% increase in the number of crashes at the same time that the population of Wildwood was expanding and we were coming out of the COVID shutdown. So thank you to you and your team.
Yep. Appreciate it.
Any commentary or questions regarding the crash analysis data? Thank you, Captain.
Okay.
Next item is the Route 100 at Forest Leaf Parkway pedestrian safety concerns.
Board members, this next item is on the agenda for information at this point. It's more or less in progress. So I wanted to update you with regard to the current situation. And Brendan, if you're listening, maybe you can pull up or share the one of the exhibits, or maybe the second exhibit B, if that's possible, if you can hear me. So we've gotten concerns related to the department relative to the safety of the crosswalk over Forest Leaf Parkway at Route 100. Forest Leaf, if you're not familiar, is between Taylor Road and West Glen Farms. It's the right in, right out on the north side of Route 100. Along the north side of Route 100, of course, we have the Wildwood Greenway, shared use path. And so the concern is really relative to pedestrian safety in the shared use path as folks are crossing Forest Leaf Parkway immediately north of Route 100. More recently, Councilmember McCutcheon had passed along a concern with lighting at nighttime at that location, and you may not know it, but there is a dusk to dawn light that's installed on an Ameren pole on the east side of Forest Leaf Parkway. It's kind of tucked behind a tree, a deciduous tree. And so the concern was, should we essentially improve the lighting at that location? So those are kind of the two concerns that have been relayed to the department. The safety of pedestrians in the crosswalk relative to cars turning off of Route 100. Obviously, Route 100 is a higher speed roadway. And so they're turning across the crosswalk. And from that perspective, the department is obviously concerned with providing the safest facility possible. So we've started to look into this. And as far as the lighting goes, it was something we decided to kind of hold off until right about now because of the fact that the trees were leafing out. So we do have an arborist on board now, which was something new for the city. So I've had him take a look at it, and we are going to plan on visiting the site at night and try to get a sense on how much the tree is screening the dusk to dawn light. So the next step assuming that we concur, it probably needs some improvement, would be to look to maybe trim that tree. I don't know if that's going to make enough difference or not, but we're going to look at the tree to trim it, maybe potentially remove it, or the next step would be to look to improve the lighting. Could conceivably add a new light pole there, I suppose. Incidentally, we don't really know who maintains that light. A lot of those lights are paid for by the subdivision HOA. I don't know that for a fact is the case here, but I know that we don't pay the bill on it. So the obvious culprit would be the HOA. So we'll maybe check on that as well. As far as the safety in the crosswalk, I kind of presented to you in that exhibit the thoughts that we have as far as improving it. And I think this crosswalk is one of the earlier ones that we constructed as a city. So there are some things we could do and request be done potentially to improve and update the signing. And I haven't mentioned this, but the reality is this crosswalk, the path is constructed within MoDOT's right of way. So they've granted us the ability to build the trail on the right of way. The downside is we have to go back to them for any changes or modifications and request their authorization or approval. So what I'm proposing here is all has to be run through MoDOT and we have to get their concurrence on it. So we've not done that yet, but what I'd like to do is present this to them and request their concurrence. And if it's something that the city has to do, then we will move forward and implement the changes. But essentially it's to add the signing at the crosswalk. We want to put a stop sign on the southbound approach. Quite frankly, right now it is a yield sign, which is a little unusual. I think it'd be more consistent with the other locations if we replace the yield with a stop sign. Approaching the crosswalk from Route 100, there's, in my opinion and consistent with some other trails, a need for a new trail crossing sign. And in advance of that is the yield to pedestrian sign. And I believe these are both allowed under the MUTCD, which is the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which is the federal guidance that we are required to follow. So we would like to submit these to MoDOT and get their concurrence. And then if they allow it, we will be glad to put them up if necessary. In addition, we want to restripe the crosswalk. And I think there's some other modifications we could do with the edge stripe coming off Route 100 that would help to delineate the travel path for motorists. So Scott, our street superintendent, Scott Hummel, has that on his to-do list to get the crosswalk striped and improve the visibility of the crosswalk. So with that, I think that highlights most of the changes. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to take them at this time. Again, the thought would be to move forward and submit this to MoDOT. We have scheduled the striping. That is something I think we can do at a minimal. It's expected as part of our responsibilities, but the signing changes, I would like to submit those to MoDOT and get their authorization before we just jump out there and do that.
Is there a turn lane approaching Forest Leaf? You know, when you're on 100, or is it just straight off the highway, straight on Forest Leaf? I mean, I don't know. So
It's a little hard to see, and I don't know, Brendan, if you can pull up Google Maps, that might help too.
Yeah,
There's a little bit of a taper there that is somewhat of a turn lane. It's not a full turn lane, but there is a partial turn lane that's a taper. Yeah.
So, and I think, speaking on my behalf, I think the first step is to approach MoDOT and see what their feeling is on this, because they actually control that area. So. Any conversation from the board?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Yes, sir.
Rick, on the changing it to a stop sign, I come that way all the time. And the problem you have is wherever you put that stop sign, you cannot see what's coming down 100 because of the shrubs along the trail. So the yield sign, at least people can kind of ease up there slowly, but then you have people on the trail, but you can't see oncoming traffic till you get way out there. So I mean, I know you place a sign and go past it, but you'll be a good 60, 70 feet past the sign if it's back where you'd expect it to be on that side of the trail. So just a thought.
Well, we'll certainly defer to the captain if he has any thoughts on that as well. But I would agree that in that situation, you'd have to pull forward beyond the stop sign to really see traffic coming at you from 100.
Yeah, I think the yield sign probably serves serves the purpose, as Mr. Marshall said. My concerns, and we talked about already, Rick, freshen up the crosswalk painting. And as you mentioned, making sure there's a clear picture or outline of the where the traffic lane is as opposed to the crosswalk. And then those the signage pointing out the pedestrian crossing to the approaching vehicles on 100. But I agree with Mr. Marshall, the yield sign probably serves its purpose.
It sounds like reference Forest Leaf that you have the board support to approach MoDOT and go from there, sir.
That'd be great. Thank you very much.
Next item of business is old business, the Green Pines Elementary School, the on-street student pickup concerns. I see we have a pretty good memo on this. Do we still kind of have the same issue that we did earlier in the school year?
Well, board members, I wanted to bring this to you. Again, we have unfortunately still had received some concerns from the trustees that represent that area. And Mr. Marshall, if you want to talk about that, you're certainly more than welcome. But my understanding is that they really wanted to see some additional signs installed similar with regard to what we did at Lafayette High School. So I wanted to bring this to you for consideration tonight. And what I've essentially put on paper is to follow suit with what was done at Lafayette, or what is in progress of being done at Lafayette, frankly, and provide this as an option to be implemented. Again, what we'd be doing is adding additional no stopping or standing signs, and I'm recommending it in the afternoon dismissal hour only. So essentially half hour before and after, which would be 3:30 to 4:30 in the afternoon. And Brendan, maybe if you can pull up the exhibit that shows the locations graphically. I think it's Exhibit B.
And I take it like on page 5 here, they show a sign is that the signage you would put up?
It would be similar, consistent with what we're doing at Lafayette, correct? It would be similar to that sign. And again, as I had shown in the memorandum, the thought was in the areas in yellow would be where we would implement the no stopping or standing signs if you choose to do that. Incidentally, the areas in red are already restricted per the traffic schedules as no parking areas. Not sure we have them posted as well as we probably could. So we'll review that as well. But this request to you would be to add the no stopping or standing signs in those areas marked in yellow on the exhibit, effectively mimicking what we have done at Lafayette High School. I would note that the logic here was to kind of go about 500 feet beyond the school with the signs. So that's very arbitrary, quite frankly. It might be that if we put these up, we may need to go further. But this was a starting point, I thought. And the 500 would take you up to Evergreen Forest on the south of Green Pines. And so I was kind of consistent to the north and to the west. And that's kind of what I did here, but I'm certainly open to any recommendations from the board. So tonight, that is kind of the request, is to consider additional signs at Green Pines Elementary, consistent with what we're doing at Lafayette High School to address this situation. And with that, I'll turn it over for any questions.
Well, I don't know that we would get, in my opinion, I don't know that we would get 100% compliance, but if we can reduce it by, whatever, 50%, 60%, and alleviate part of the problem.
Parents are gonna say, taking, I'm gonna have to pick up. And that's just the way down and understand that. Let's hate to do something that is just pushing it down a block further. But if this is the most effective thing we can do, then I would support.
Well, the school does have a means for pickup, right? I mean, it's just they don't want to go through that process. They're circumventing it, having their kids cross the road. I mean, I think it's keeping parents from making bad choices of having their kids cross.
Challenges, there's no school buses. So, I live probably third of a mile, quarter mile, and people are walking kids with strollers because there's no buses. Now, I will say this, so if I come down in the morning and I walk, I think what Cassier is, it's laid out pretty well. You notice where the red no, so that's kind of where they queue up. And the principal who was there, I think he did a pretty good job. Now he's been promoted, so he won't be there next year, but the assistant principal. But the parents line up pretty well. The problem is they push all the way back out onto West Glen and start up the hillside. And then they're walking across. Now they have a guard, a parent, that's a guard both at West Glen and Barbara, and then one at Forest Lee. But I think my question would be, what about the people who actually park on those streets that live in those houses? Will this won't apply to them, correct? I mean, people park in front of their house on Green Pines Drive, and it's a narrow road. But does that have any effect on them, or is it only people who would stop to let people out?
Captain Mundell, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm parked in the street in front of my house and your team runs my license plate, I'm probably not going to get a ticket.
Well, you put us in a predicament because the street obviously is not owned by the resident.
Right.
But it's public.
It is a public street, and we keep struggling with this and pushing this parking problem all over the place. So in reality, we get the call that this is happening, and there's 10 parents, 10 people aren't getting tickets.
Right.
Unless we lock down the area to capture everyone and to get them tickets. This is a very short-term problem. 10 minutes, 12 minutes, and this stuff is over.
Right.
And as Mr. Marshall indicated, the principal has done a fantastic job and has this planned out to a T as far as getting people in and out. There's more cars coming in there than he's got room to deal with. We did meet, Rick and I met with the Rockwood School District 2 months ago, roughly, just to hear what their issues were regarding school bus drivers. They got openings, they want to hire people. So if anybody wants to drive, they're willing to take you on. Some of their drivers, if it's someone who lives in the city of St. Louis, they're not going to drive to West County for a couple hour job. So they're very challenged in getting applicants. They have a large number of driver openings. So this isn't changing as far as bus drivers in the near future. The school has done their part to announce to the parents, follow the rules, follow the procedures. They tell their kids to tell them that you're a walker and I'm going to park up the street. And the parents are putting their own kids in these situations. And if they follow the rules, it moves very, very swiftly and pretty efficiently, but they bypass it. So we have this issue at Green Pines, and then we've talked about the one by Lafayette. At end of school day, I'm not deploying the entire police force to chase parents around and write parking tickets. It's just not. We have things that are happening that need the police as opposed to making sure the parents follow the rules. We hope that we get compliance, with any violations. So it being posted, that's enough warning. We will make the effort, when those signs go in to have a presence there to deter that. But I won't guarantee that I'm gonna have a cop on every corner at every school every day. It just can't happen. So.
Are there SROs in the elementary schools?
So SROs there's 4 SROs. They're assigned to the high school, 1 officer's at Lafayette, and the other 3 are at the middle schools. They are subbed more or less out to or assigned to an elementary school. So the officer that's assigned to the high school also covers Green Pines. But at the end of the day, they get out within 10 minutes of each other, and I can't draw from him.
No, okay.
But Rockwood did add their security guys. There's 4 of them, but they're responsible for all the elementary schools in the district, and they have a zone and there's multiple
So
schools.
there's not an officer on site of each
No,
building that
no.
can just.
It's, like I said, it's handled by the immediate school staff very, very, very well. And you know, we make our appearances there to try and help with that. And it corrects for a while and then slowly, you know, comes back. So a couple tickets, you know, may be the deterrent. I can't guarantee I'm gonna write everybody a ticket though.
Well, I think having the signs there just to make it known helps a lot.
Right.
And then parents will play dumb and they ask kids, some will still just ignore it, but you start somewhere, especially with no buses and you have more kids walking there
Right.
than normal. I meant I feel, you know, we need some move to protect them, and then it's upon the parents to abide by it. And maybe possibly with putting those up is, I think they're still hiring more security.
I
Rockwood, they
don't
got a
know
couple opens.
if that'll happen. There was some
Okay.
talk of them adding some additional guys, but I don't know if that's
Okay.
been approved.
But
yet.
maybe with them, we could request, like when we start that, instead of your manpower, that they make that. I know they're doing random kind of visits to them all.
Now,
They couldn't run.
they don't have authority out on the streets.
I understand,
They
but just to point and say, you know, just as the school staff
visibility.
would. Not, it's just a, hey, please, I'm
Right.
not. You would hope at some point parents take some responsibility or
Right.
some respect for the school their kids are going to.
Well, we've
but I
been
just-
dealing with this
just
for
kinda
years
had-
and it hasn't. happened.
Yeah, you wonder which one's the kid, right? The one they're
Right.
picking up or the one picking them up. But maybe to ask them just to assist with that to start to, again, not enforce it, but make notice to people and.
Oh, sure.
and, you know, get some of that manpower they have to just help remind people there.
Right. We can ask.
So the cars that park in front of their houses along that, I mean, it appears to me that a couple of those are people that work at night and then they park the car and go to bed in the morning when you're walking. So there will be some cars there, but they can park there. Is that correct? Where we have the yellow lines? Because they would have been parked there way more than just those 20, 30 minutes.
So what you're asking is for the law to be applied. I can't say that.
No,
Honestly.
I understand that. All I'm saying is I know those people, when I walk that way, there are people who will park on that street. As a matter of fact, there's about 6 people every morning who go down to the Green Pines Park. The moms sit there with their cars and all the kids walk to school together. So they're not parking on the streets. They fill up the parking lot at the Green Pines, which is fine. And then they kind of all walk and kids keep coming out, adding to it. And they get their little troops as they come down to cross over. I was just curious because I do know people park overnight on that particular section of the street. However it will be, I'm sure they can, you know, they could work around it. My other question would be though, because I've seen the accidents almost happen here, and this is up on West Glen going up the hill in that curve. Landscaping trucks or whatever pull in there, and the parents pull up there. And they even queue up on this upper side, and the school's got them pretty well doing that. But that is really dangerous because you're going into that turn. And that's where you'll see if there's a service delivery truck, or because some of the parents will pull up that hillside on West Glen and park there and pick up their kids. And then that's where you'll see kids cut across West Glen. So I was just a little curious, was there any thoughts on, you know, that 4 or 5 car lengths up into that turn? Because it's kind of a blind turn, unfortunately. And maybe it's just not during those hours, you know, but I have seen people and I've seen kids cut out in front of people and the traffic guard who's down there yelling and screaming at them, but they're kids, you know, and if the parent parks up there. So I think anything we can do will be greatly appreciated. I know how much of a challenge it is for you all.
I think that area that you said is probably more of the priority out of any of this, because you're kind of going up a blind curve
And
and,
people coming down,
right.
one's coming down from Lafayette, come down that hill. That's pretty nasty. So I don't know if you had a chance to look at that, but I've seen
Yeah, we have talked about
more
that.
close hits there than I have down in here where they have the
Right.
other part. But they do, you're absolutely right. They do stop. The street's so narrow, there's not a whole lot of room for them over there.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, so do we have some direction we want to go with this? Do we want to, you know, from the
Might be
board?
Where the originated, They're from the school, from the police department, from the residents.
From the residents.
There's a lot of parents that have reached out to the city, and they're typically parents that are picking up, and they do it the right way, and they go through the pickup line, but they see parents that are doing it the incorrect way and breaking the rules, and they're worried. There's some that have raised concerns that someone's going to get hit, something along those lines.
The area with the red, there aren't any homes there. So that works out really well. You're not blocking any driveways or anything. So there's not any homes from West Glen all the way up into the entrance of the school on that south side. So it's all pretty open area in order to do that. So you don't get complaints from those because there's nobody living there.
Question now, does the school not just have dismissal procedures to where, there's dedicated walkers that walk every day that say, guys, your parents, whatever signed up, you live in a reasonable proximity to walk home every day, or, you stay within this vicinity to be picked up and you don't leave it. That's how it was when I grew up. I'm surprised that they're just letting kids run off in every direction.
I think it's pretty organized.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, in this case, it's anywhere if the child lives within 1 mile of the school, they are allowed to walk home, and actually they have to walk home because there's no buses. But if they're getting picked up, the children actually come out the back end, and you can see how it kind of swoops around the school in the back. That's where everyone's kind of queued up, and they circle back behind the school. They do the pickup, and then they get to come out, and they leave through the area where it's marked no parking. They come out that area, but it is pretty organized. The department's has reviewed it along with the captain. But there are those individuals that just tend to park on the street.
There are some of the daycare centers today have little mini buses. They pick up 4 or 5 kids there, I guess. But I saw them queued up today.
This is your council district, right, Ed?
Oh, yeah.
Do you recommend support this?
I think they really need that. I'm just concerned a little kid's gonna get hit. But I think the area is really tight there. My concern would be, again, I just think the West Glen thing is a bigger risk. These are narrow and people are going, but they're not gonna speed down here through that intersection, but they do stop their cars and then other people have to get around them. But I think it's a good way to go. I just was curious about the people who do park in front of their houses. And that car may be there for all day, if that's an issue or not.
It really just depends. I mean, there's cars that don't have the right plates on the car. I mean, there's all kinds of scenarios that can come up where somebody's going to get a ticket who thinks that they should not have. And the officer's not improper in writing the ticket because it's posted and they were there. There's no exemption in the law for you can do this in front of your own house. I mean,
They have driveways.
that's the argument that we face.
Yep.
We'll do our best to use our best discretion. I'll say that.
Well, and by having, at least if we put signs up, then the police department has the authority to at least ask people to move on. Now they don't.
Right.
Yeah. So, putting up the signs would give the authority to the Wildwood Police Department to ask people to please move on. Right now, they have no authority. If I'm parked there, there's nothing that they can do other than tell me I'm being unsafe. So,
And the signs support the behavior we want to see. So I make a motion to approve the request as it's written. And then the one thing I would add is as we discussed, possible concern farther up, that we pay attention to that and maybe follow up on that after the signs are in to see if there's any recommendations for farther up.
I'll second it.
Yes,
all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Brown, it looks like you have the support of the board to move forward with your memorandum.
All right, thank you very much.
Next item of business is the existing turn restrictions on 109 at Turkey Track Lane, the YMCA driveway. Mr. Brown, do you have a brief on this?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Marshall. This next one really, at least from the department's perspective, is more of a bookkeeping cleanup that we need to undertake. And we've caught a few of these. In fact, you actually had one in front of you a few months ago where we had signs, regulatory signs installed on the roadway. But when we check on them, they're not included in our traffic schedules. So our traffic schedules generally will include a detailed listing of ordinances that have been implemented for turn restrictions, for parking restrictions, for speed limit restrictions, those sort of things. So in this case, there's been over time developments that have occurred on 109, the YMCA, in that area where those driveways have been modified to restrict turning movements. And Brennan, maybe if you can pull up the exhibits from the memo. The two streets in question are Turkey Track Lane and then the driveway into the YMCA, both on the west side of Route 109, south of Route 100. Both of those driveways are restricted. Currently, the Turkey Track Lane is intended to be a right turn exit only. And then the driveway in at the YMCA opposite of Westridge Oaks is a right in, right out only. That's the way they were constructed, and that's essentially the way they're signed currently and have been signed for several years, frankly. But in reviewing the traffic schedules, we noted none of those turning restrictions appear on our traffic schedule. So the recommendation tonight is to move forward with officially adding those turn restrictions to our traffic regulations that will require the city council to pass an ordinance to do that. So that's what we'd like to recommend to the board tonight. And if you approve the recommendation, we'll move forward with the ordinance with the city council at their next meeting. And with that, I'll certainly available for any questions.
So basically the signs are there. There's just nothing on the traffic enforcement schedule to enforce them.
That
So
is,
we're just requesting legislation to enforce existing signage.
that's correct.
Do I hear a motion to support that?
Make the motions.
Awesome.
All in favor?
Yeah, question first.
Mr. Marshall has one question.
I will never have to write the ticket, but I don't understand. No right turn for southbound traffic on Missouri Route 109. It's right out only, right?
The Turkey Track is a right out only, correct?
So should that be on there then? The regulation is no right turn. Is that what
That's correct.
but that's the only way to get out now.
So this is.
For southbound
No,
traffic,
you can't come, Turkey Ridge, you can't come in from 109.
Yeah,
That's all
109.
that's saying, no right
Correct it
turn.
out.
No right
Just a
turn
right-
for southbound.
Right out only.
It's a right out.
Yeah.
Correct.
so Turkey Track, I refer to it as an east-west roadway.
Yeah.
So the Turkey Track, you aren't allowed to turn left from Turkey Track for eastbound traffic. And there's no left turn for northbound traffic, and there's no right turn for southbound.
But is that how you would say that? That's into Turkey Track then, so it's no right for southbound traffic on Missouri 109 onto Turkey Track. Onto Turkey Track's part I wasn't picking up on.
It's cut out.
Okay.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a one-way road.
He's right in, right out.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I would say you have to look at it in terms of the overall location. The location is Missouri Route 109 at Turkey Track Lane.
So you can't do it either. Yeah.
You can't go in.
It's just supporting the fact that that's one way out.
Right out. Got it.
Exit on.
Basically a private agent. That was it.
Yeah.
That's where the temple's gonna be.
And
But
Rick, is that sign there? Is that a MoDOT sign or is that yours? What's on the screen?
So we have reached out to MoDOT to get concurrence from them whether they are maintaining the regulatory signs. And we believe that is something that they do and they prefer to do. So right now, we believe there is no sign on Turkey Track outbound, eastbound in place, and that needs to be corrected. And that was there previously based on what we saw on the Google Street View. So I think it was in place, but at some point got removed. Did I lose everybody? You don't see it in that vantage point that Brendan's showing there. I don't know if there's Street View from Turkey Track, but yeah.
I think we need to revote since Mr. Marshall is content with the answer, so the Board of Public Safety recommends that we move forward with legislation to support existing signage. Next item of business. Consideration of a guardrail in Garden Valley Farm subdivision. There's a packet at each of our locations that talks about this. And if I understand it correctly, we have a request for the city of Wildwood to remove the guardrail, replace it, or repaint it, one of the three.
That is correct.
So Brennan, maybe you can put up some of the exhibits from the memorandum. I did post a memorandum later in the day, board members. I apologize for the lateness of it. This issue pertains to the guardrail that's been installed in Garden Valley Farm subdivision, which I think most of you know where that's at. It's on the east side of 109, north of Route 100. When the subdivision was constructed some 15 years or so ago, there was 3 runs of guardrail installed on the residential streets. One is on Whispering Hollow Court, the other 2 are on Garden Valley Court. The guardrail was installed because there's a creek under the road with culverts under both those roads. There's about a 20-foot fill embankment at that location. So when the subdivision was engineered, the designer made a judgment that guardrail would be a worthwhile installation at those locations, primarily due to the embankment height and the fact that there's a creek below. So at closeout of the subdivision, apparently there was a request or determination made to paint the guardrail black for aesthetic purposes. The city arranged to have that done for the subdivision. There were funds, I understand, to be available through the closeout of the subdivision that were used for that purpose. But it's difficult to determine much beyond that at this point. So some 15 years later, the painted guardrail is starting to peel. Could use a new coat of paint, could use some work from a maintenance perspective. The guardrails are functionally fine and they're not damaged in any way that I'm aware of. In fact, I don't know that they've ever been struck by a car at any point. And I don't know that we've found any crash history that would say that either. It's more an issue at this point that they do need to be repainted. The HOA reached out to the city over this, and we've been working on this for a bit now with the subdivision. And as I made in some comments in the report, most cases when we install or guardrails installed on residential streets, we place it outside the sidewalk, and in most cases that is on private property. So it does not become a maintenance issue of the city. It ends up falling back on the HOA to maintain it. And when I reviewed the improvement plans, that was what I deemed was the intent of the engineer at the time. That the guardrail was placed outside the right-of-way, beyond the public street right-of-way, outside the sidewalk. Now, we have 3 runs of guardrail. I think in 2 cases there is a sidewalk, 1 there is not. So long and short of it is we're really not 100% sure where the guardrail was totally constructed. And without doing a survey, we really can't say with certainty whether it's on city right-of-way or on HOA property. But in the past, when the department has received these requests, I will say that the policy has been, quite frankly, if a subdivision wants aesthetic improvements, that's fine, but they have to take the cost on themselves and be responsible for the maintenance of that item in the future. And that has been done elsewhere throughout the subdivisions in the Wildwood. I mean, the Green Pines, West Glen Farms, there's a run of guardrail on West Glen Farms that's been painted. That one actually is on city right away, and that was done by the HOA some time ago. So there are other instances where we've allowed it to occur, and the understanding was it would be the subdivision's responsibility, I believe, to maintain it. So just to give you that background, in this case, when this request came to us, we did help the HOA determine the cost. We got a bid from a contractor to paint the guardrail, and it came in about 11 grand, which does seem high. Now, this is a professional outfit that would professionally strip and repaint the galvanized rail, so it should last another 15 years. Should have good length of life if it's done that in that manner. This was a quote. We didn't bid it. It's probably on the high side, but it is more than the HOA was willing to expend at this time. So given the cost of the repainting, the thought was maybe we just remove the guardrail, and that would alleviate obviously the need to repaint it. So that's kind of where we're at with this request is, does it make sense to remove the guardrail? And I will tell you, so we did look at it from this perspective, and there actually is engineering guidance with regard to the installation of guardrail that we try to follow, or engineers try to follow. But as I try to make the point, guardrail is really intended to be installed on highways. It's really not intended to be installed or designed to be installed on low-speed roadways. It's engineered to be impacted at high speed, not at 25 miles an hour. So it probably helps in this situation, but I will tell you that there is no, from my perspective, warrant or requirement that that guardrail be there. It really kind of boils down to more of a subjective or an engineering opinion as to whether it makes sense and whether the guardrail makes it safer or not. If you run into a guardrail, you're impacting an obstacle that's fixed. So you're going to incur property damage. You could get injured. Guardrail as it is installed is an obstacle. So there's a downside with it being on the right of way or installed along a roadway. In theory, you should only have it there if it's going to benefit, the incident that might occur. So I guess the long and short of it is that Captain and I have both kind of looked at this from our perspectives and tried to render an opinion on these 3 runs of guardrail. And I think if you boil it down, there's the 2 locations. Brendan, maybe you can can you pull up the exhibit that goes? Yeah, the aerial view, I thought maybe it wouldn't help too much better. Yeah, so the run on Whispering Hollow Court, as you look at the exhibit on the left side, that run of guardrail is on the outside of a curve. And I think from the perspective of Captain and myself, we feel like it probably should remain in place. Given the location that it's installed at, the fact that there's a curve and it's at the outside of a curve, we kind of lean to the perspective that the run on Whispering Hollow would be better off in place and should stay in place. When you switch over to Garden Valley Court, the other location with the 2 runs of guardrail, 1 on each side, that location is straighter. Maybe Brendan, you can go over there. It's hard to tell from this perspective. That location is straight, at least in the vicinity of the guardrail. The way the road is graded, there's a little more room for an errant vehicle potentially to recover. So I think when Captain and I look at it, I think we'd be comfortable if that run of rail on both sides on Garden Valley Court were removed, quite frankly. But we want to bring this to you as a board, and we're asking essentially your opinion, for you to render a judgment whether you concur with this request or not. Do we leave all the guardrail in place? Do we remove some of it or all of it? So with that, I think I'll wrap up. Captain, do you want to add anything to this discussion at this time?
No, I think you hit it, so to speak.
So with nothing further, I think I'll stop. And if there's questions, we'll be glad to do our best to address them at this point. But again, we'd like you to render an opinion as to whether you feel we should leave it all in place, remove some of it, or remove all of it.
And we probably don't have the answer for this, but do we know how the majority of the residents in that neighborhood feel about this, or do we just have the opinions of a few? My concern is that Wildwood decides to take out the guardrail, and then we have an uproar about what you do with our guardrail, and then we have to pay to put it back in. So that's my concern.
Well, help me understand, would we remove or it'd be upon them to remove? Because I kind of took it that it's on theirs. We can give them approval to remove two of them, but it would not be our responsibility to remove.
The city would incur the entire cost to remove the guardrail and they would be
Okay.
responsible for backfill.
I think it's, yeah.
Why?
In this case, there is theoretically, this guardrail should be out of the right of way. That being said, plans are sometimes a little bit incorrect just based off what actually ends up getting built. We do not have definitive proof that the entirety of the guardrail is off of the right of way. So right now it's kind of a gray area, but theoretically though, it should all be off the public right of way. And we would be able to say firmly no if we were able to conduct the survey, but the survey ended up costing more than the removal of the guardrail itself.
Would the survey cost that much?
It would cost around $3,200.
What about the plats? They're not. I mean, I remember when this whole thing went in, it was Levinson and they had foundations, all different levels and everything else. But my question would be is, we can't tell then from the sidewalks as to where their common ground starts.
For the one with the sidewalk, when it's outside of the sidewalk, that one is pretty clear that it's definitely off the right of way. But for the other, I can refer to the Director of Public Works, but those ones, you can kind of see it bends a little bit off the road. Some of it's a little bit closer, some of it's a little bit further. Captain actually went out and did some measurements, but it seems like some of it, there could be very well 20% of the guardrail that seems like it, from my perspective, when I visited, that might be in the public right of way.
And the request was for Wildwood to incur the cost of whatever we're gonna do with them.
That is correct. And they said they would backfill it. So we would remove, they would backfill.
Mr. Boyle?
Yeah, as a member of the Public Safety Committee, it seems inconsistent that we would do something that lessens public safety. So don't know that I would want to support a president's, plus with my background, it's just inconsistent with taking something away that has a potential of benefiting the community. I did drive these today just to take a look and see what we're talking about. And I would agree with the one that's on the north side of the one road. It's on a pretty flat piece of earth. The other two do trend down towards drainage areas, it appears. So that, but I think the sole purpose for them wanting them removed is because the cost incurred with maintaining them. I think that's just inconsistent, what I believe to be the mission of the Public Safety Committee. I would be opposed to this.
I was thinking that there might have been a compromise there, that they didn't want to spend the $11,000 to paint them because they felt that was part of their budget and they should do that. But that we could say, well, those two that you don't think are practical, or if the price was $2,800 to have those taken out, is you paint the one that's yours and you take the other two out and you save less than $11,000. I mean, and it doesn't have to be all done at one time. I mean, I've been trustees long enough in subdivision to lay it out over a 2-3 year plan, paint one, and next year we'll take out one or do the next year. I just don't know that the city should go in taking out something that's a potential safety, but even if it was put in there, it's there. And the cost of going in to take it out just because they don't want to pay to maintain it. Every subdivision out here will tell you there's stuff they'd like the city to take over, the lights on their subdivisions. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff, but if we've already done the research and it's the city's responsibility, then probably it shouldn't be at public safety. It should be at the council and let them decide on it. Because I kind of agree with Vince. I don't, from a safety standpoint, that is steep down over there on the one. The other two, I do think that's be a possibility, but so whatever
And I understand the concept of guardrails along high-speed highways with vehicles traveling very fast. And I understand this is a 25-mile-an-hour street, but on an icy day, if somebody goes over that embankment, then if they're sliding down that street and they hit that guardrail, they get to fix their car. If they're sliding down that street and that guardrail's not there and they go down that I got to agree with Vince on this one. I think removing a safety feature that is fully functional is not something we want to get involved in. Yeah.
I agree. I think in my mind, as you say, kind of that compromise, if they choose to remove the two of them, that'd be allowable. But not the expense as you say, in the right of way, out of the right of way. I know that's kind of the big question there, but obviously elsewhere they've maintained them in the right of way. Does the burden of proof become upon them to get a survey to say, hey, it's yours, not ours? Or, like say, allow them to remove those, and then they would only have to paint one ongoing.
I mean, are we in our will to give them the ability to just remove the two they want?
If they're theirs, I'm sure the city attorney's got to weigh in on this one, but if they're their guardrails, they can do whatever they want to
Yeah.
with them. My concern would be is that if the city removes them, we have two problems.
Yeah.
We're gonna have other subdivisions requesting the city make basically aesthetic improvements in their neighborhoods. Yeah.
But I wouldn't support them doing that.
No, I'm,
Yeah.
yeah, right.
But
Their will.
yeah, I gotta agree with, Vince on this one. I think it's always a bad idea to remove safety devices. It'd be like taking seatbelts out of cars. So what do? We make a motion to forward this to the city council? I figure it out. So,
That is completely up to you, as the board.
Well, I think we were looking for a motion from the board if there was an action to be taken. If you decide no motion, we would not make any action based on tonight's meeting. But if there's a specific action you'd like taken, I would definitely recommend a motion.
So, and let me ask one more question here. Is this, I know this just got dumped on, your team really quickly. Is this something at the risk of sounding like we're kicking it down the road? Do we want to wait 2 months and, to the next meeting and give the city time to evaluate this further, or do we have all the information we need?
In this case, we are kind of in a predicament where personally, I believe in Captain and our Director of Public Works can weigh in on this, but we're at a point where we're going to have to spend some money, or they're going to have to spend some money on a survey or on the removal itself, whatever it might be. But the next step, I think we have the data, we have the information we need. Next step would be some money being spent.
If I may, this has been at the Edmond Public Works Committee previously, so I don't want to overstep my bounds here, but I would anticipate we probably would go back to the Edmond Public Works Committee with a follow-up discussion. But we wanted first take this to the board, to you tonight, to get your perspective on whether removing these rails made sense or not. And I'm hearing that you feel they should remain in place.
Well, I would say as requested, that we do not approve doing it as requested. If it were to come back with modifications, I would say it is just my view, we would look at possible modifications of that specifically to, be it given them the opportunity to remove it, would we allow them to remove it, that type of thing. But specifically to how it's written, I think.
I might need some help with this motion. It's basically going to say that the Board of Public Safety does not support the city of Wildwood investing funds in the removal of these guardrails, and the matter should be referred back to the HOA for possible alternatives.
What keeps coming back to the money, which I understand, but that's not my motivation.
Right.
If somebody granted them free removal, I would still be opposed to it.
Yeah, those guardrails were put in there for a reason,
Yeah, exactly.
and they might not be, to be honest with you, they don't look near as bad as I thought they were going to.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Right.
and at the end of the day,
I think the
There are
request
safety
is
fees.
for us to support action on it. I guess I would recommend that we take no action on the motion. I mean, that way we haven't, we could take one saying we oppose it, but I don't, if they could do it anyhow.
so we can make the motion a lot shorter and just simply say the Board of Public Safety does not support the removal of safety devices that are still functional.
I'm in favor of that.
Yeah.
I make that motion.
Is that a workable motion, Mr. Brown?
I believe so. Bree, do you feel like you understand it?
I believe so. Board of Public Safety doesn't support the removal of safety devices
Of the guardrail?
of the car.
Favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Second, did we get a second on that?
I'm sorry. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, board.
All right, next item of business is, I don't believe we have any more items unless I'm not aware of something that came up the last minute. So I will accept a motion for adjournment. Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye. Thank you.